Well, our suits work just fine. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was at the Olympics, a week of frustration, joy, and of course, the agony of defeat. Meanwhile, bloodshed in nearby Ukraine as the death toll rises. Closer to home, American TV, the store where you bought your first VCR, closes its doors. Milwaukee School Superintendent Gregory Thornton becomes the latest MPS superintendent to go through the revolving door. After 4 years here, Thornton gets a new job in Baltimore. In Madison, a $500 million tax cut moves ahead in the state legislature. The Congressional Budget Office says that raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour would cost the economy 500,000 jobs by the end of 2016, maybe as many as 1 million jobs. Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett calls for urgent action to fix the city's potholes, which apparently was to ask the state for more money. But the big stories last week were politicians behaving badly. Now, the media had a feeding frenzy over the release of 27,000 pages of 4-year-old emails, but we start with another story of genuinely ugly politics. It involves Milwaukee's sheriff, its county executive, and a political operative. Last year, Democrat spokesman Graham Zielinski lost his job after he sent out a tweet comparing Governor Scott Walker to serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. But that apparently did not stop Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abele from putting Zielinski on his campaign payroll. Abele's campaign paid Zielinski $10,000 to do unspecified research. But for months, Zielinski has been targeting Sheriff David Clark, one of Abele's political critics and opponents. But Zielinski's attacks on Clark have not been politics as usual. In dozens of postings, Abele's new consultant accused the African-American sheriff, without any proof, of domestic violence. In several posts on Twitter, Zielinski flatly accused Clark of beating his wife and breaking her arm. Sheriff Clark categorically denies the charge. Not only is it totally false, he says, there is nothing even close to it, not even a misunderstanding or some other taken out of context explanation. So last week, we asked the question, was Zielinski working for Abele? Was Milwaukee County Executive actually bankrolling one of the ugliest smear attempts in local political history? Abele says no, telling another television station this: I was trying to research who is where, kind of get a lay of the land, and Graham has a great sense of who is where. Of Zielinski's accusations against Clark, Abele only said, the work I had him do was not an approval of that style of communication. Sheriff Clark is not buying that and is calling on Abele to come clean about his $10,000 payment to Graham Zielinski. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, political strategist Lynn DeBruin, former state representative Michelle Litchens, and the president of the Wisconsin Policy Research Institute, Mike Nichols. I want to start with you. First of all, are you satisfied with Abele's explanation here, Michael Holt?
Oh, no. And then when you associate with the devil, you're going to get a little dirty. And that's essentially what's happening. I think under any other circumstances, our sheriff would probably have a few words in a dark corner with Zielinski. But only because he's a public figure, and probably only because he's a black public figure, can anybody make these kind of unfounded allegations. I doubt very seriously if even Zielinski would say this about Tom Barrett or any other high-profile black politician.
Okay, one of the points that I tried to make on radio last week, Mike Nichols, is this is not politics as usual. I mean, there's a lot of ugly personal stuff that goes on in politics. But you and I have been in journalism a long time. I don't remember anything quite like this. Somebody with a financial link to somebody as prominent as Abele making these kinds of allegations.
Well, it's not unusual for a politician to hire somebody, not taxpayer money, but with campaign money, to hire a political operative, even one who does opposition research. That happens all the time. They're listed as a consultant, usually on the campaign reports. We still have a question. I guess it's not exactly clear what Graham Zielinski was doing for Chris Abele, but it's certainly the nature of these tweets, and I think they were tweets, and the accusations are extremely unusual. And the sheriff is very clear that they're false, and that raises the question of whether they're defamatory and whether there should be legal action, in my mind.
Okay, Linda Bruin. Now, the county executive not only is not saying why he paid Graham Zielinski $10,000, he doesn't seem willing to go very far to condemn these kinds of attacks on Clark. I mean, there's no mystery. I mean, Abele and Clark don't like each other. They're political rivals. What do you make of this?
Well, I agree that if with the nature of the attacks and the fact that there is no substantiation, there may be a lawsuit claim that the sheriff has against Zelensky. And frankly, I think he should move forward with that. And I think that would flesh out some of the indirect connections between Zelensky and Abele, if there is some. Because if Zelensky's in trouble and there is a connection, then he might publicly, reveal more of his background. But on the surface, we don't have enough information.
If Abele did not hire Graham Zelensky to do just this, he had the responsibility to come out immediately and say, I don't approve of this, I think this is wrong, I did not hire him to do this, but he hasn't done that yet.
Okay, now why not? Because he easily could have done that. I mean, this is a follow the money type thing. I mean, normally you would say, okay, the Graham Zelensky is just one of these, political nasty nut jobs who's saying these things, and people have been ignoring him for some time. But now you have the county executive paying him $10,000. That's not chump change in opposition research. So why did Abele, first of all, hire him, but why is he unwilling to denounce these kinds of allegations?
I think he obviously then is condoning what he's doing. Or he's saying that it's the right thing by Zelensky being out there saying what he's saying.
All right, now I've talked about this extensively on my radio show. I think this as a significant news story. I don't know how it's not a news story. Sheriff Clark is publicly denying the allegations, categorically denying them, pushing back, saying that Abele needs to come clean. He believes that Abele hired Graham Zelensky specifically to target him. How is that not a news story, Michael Holt?
It's not a news story because he's a black sheriff who just happens to be very conservative. He will be running as a Democrat. Nobody within the status quo political organization, including the Journal Sentinel, particularly like him because he speaks out too often. I mean, and I'm one of those say, I may not agree with what he has to say, but I still.
So you're talking about a black conservative sheriff. You can actually publicly say you can accuse him of a crime. You can accuse him of most of the vile things around there. It can be that person who did that can be financially linked to the county executive, and it's not a news story.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, what has your glass half full, and what has your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. We'll start with you, Michael Holt.
Well, my glass is half empty because the U.S. women's hockey team blew a 2-point lead and lost to Canada in the Olympic finals. It's half full because they are still ranked #1 in some circles and brought home silver medals.
Michelle Litchens.
My glass is half full because Milwaukee Superintendent Gregory Thornton is heading to Baltimore, but my glass is half empty because it doesn't matter who the next superintendent is. Unless the MPS school board honestly wants to improve education for their students, nothing's going to change.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my glass is half full that the Department of Human Services pulled their offer to hire Daniel Montaldi, whose Florida work history showed he had a permissive approach to releasing sexual offenders. But my glass is half empty because staff should have better researched Montaldi before offering him a job where he could put Wisconsin residents at risk.
Mike Nichols.
Some state lawmakers made it clear the other day they won't pay for so-called living wage increases in Milwaukee County that could eventually make the family care program insolvent and harm the folks who currently benefit from it. That's a good thing. Not so good? The so-called living wage could still be implemented and taxpayers, the elderly and the disabled, could still be left in the lurch.
Well, my glass is half empty because this winter has been brutal and seemingly endless. It's half full because last Friday was the deadline for all players to report for spring training. The end is in sight. Now, next on Sunday Insight, the big document drop. What, if anything, did we learn from the release of those tens of thousands of John Doe emails? Media frenzy doesn't quite capture it. Dozens, maybe hundreds of reporters pouring over 27,000 pages of emails from a former aide to Scott Walker when he was county executive. The story, drew national attention and led to banner headlines suggesting that Walker may have been linked to a secret email system in the county executive's office. But other than that, the emails were basically old news from an investigation that was closed with no charges against Walker. The Journal Sentinel seems to be covering the story like the second coming of Watergate, while the national publication Politico described the story as, in its words, a snoozer. So what's your big takeaway from the Doe emails, Mike Nichols?
The big story is that there's no big story. The Journal Sentinel and other media spent a lot of money, frankly, and a lot of time trying to get these emails, so they were duty-bound to report on them. But there's really no connection to Scott Walker. There's no indication that Scott Walker was somehow operating or hiding some kind of shadow government. There are no emails there that even are directly from or to Scott Walker.
Okay, Linda Bruin.
Well, I agree that I think there's no direct link to Walker to illegal campaign activities. On the other hand, we learned a lot more about how some of his top staff and how they engaged in not only illegal activity, but some really obnoxious, racist type of behavior. And that's that's disconcerting.
Okay, your one takeaway.
What we really learned is who Scott Walker is. He is the Boy Scout that we see him to be. He is that honest guy when you hear him on TV and you meet him in person. And I think if you can look at a year of personal emails where no one thought the public was going to read them, and you learned nothing about Scott Walker.
What about this big headline that says, you know, emails link him to the secret system? What was the secret system they linked him to, Mike Nichols?
Well, I was a little perplexed by that, I have to say, because there's nothing wrong with sending or receiving emails that are not on your government email account.
It turns out to be Gmail and Yahoo, right? The secret system.
In fact, it's wholly appropriate if to use a private email account under the right circumstances.
Your takeaway, Michael Holt.
Well, if nothing else, those behind this John Doe were successful because they put Scott Walker on the defense. Now everybody has to explain what happened. You know, I was looking at some of the Democratic emails that are going out and solicitations for money that I get constantly. And from what I read, you know, he pimp slapped the Pope. I mean, he did something serious enough to be impeached. I mean, if you want to buy it, and then they even created this new website by the funders of Hillary Clinton.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the Democrats are all in on this. They have made it very clear they're going to run on this. They're going to raise money on this. You have George Soros coming in with millions of dollars of this. So anybody thought this wasn't political. My basic takeaway was, look, there were no criminal charges. There is nothing new in these emails. You knew that because the prosecutors had those emails for 3 years. Why were there no charges? Not because John Chisholm and the prosecutors were the best buddies of Scott Walker, but because Scott Walker didn't commit a crime. He underwent 3 years of the most detailed proctological examination that we've had in local politics, and they came up with absolutely nothing. The media frenzy, frankly, was embarrassing, but I also think it raises questions. If, in fact, you know, it is a terrible thing to use email, like, for example, Yahoo or Gmail in a building. How would other public officials stack up under that standard? Does anybody in Tom Barrett's office, have they ever used a computer or an iPad or an iPhone to make a call? What about in John Chisholm's office? I think somebody ought to ask that question. You may not want to hear it, but we're going to tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, as usual, you get to go first.
Okay, Michelle did not tell me this. To the Milwaukee School Board, it's going to be tough to find a top-notch superintendent to replace Dr. Gregory Thornton as long as the perception remains that you are resistant to change and the city as a whole is apathetic about the educational crisis.
Michelle Litchens.
Well, last week Ted Nugent said that the president was a subhuman mongrel. My advice to Ted, sometimes it's okay to keep your thoughts inside and not say them out loud.
Linda Bruin.
Well, now that MPS Superintendent Greg Thornton is leaving, my advice is that we bring in a new superintendent who's willing to radically rethink how MPS should be run, and then we give this new superintendent the political support and the tools he or she needs to achieve reform.
Mike Nichols.
Wow, Michael.
Running the table.
Greg Thornton, as you well know by now, is leaving for Baltimore. My unsolicited advice for the Milwaukee School Board: find a replacement who's willing to make some noise and some waves, maybe even some enemies. A young innovator with experience outside the education bureaucracy who realizes schools can't be run the same way they were 100 years ago. Then please, with all due respect, get out of the way.
I think you guys have all gone soft. My advice to the next superintendent of the Milwaukee Public Schools: rent. Don't buy. You won't be around that long anyway. Next on Sunday Insight, the picture that sparked outrage across the country. Outrage last week over this picture and a Facebook post that said they put the fun back in funeral. A member of the Wisconsin National Guard was suspended indefinitely after this picture of members of an honor guard were pictured smiling and joking around in front of a flag-draped coffin. There was no body in the coffin. Defenders suggested the group was just blowing off steam, engaging in the sort of black humor that's common in the military. But critics said it was a disgusting show of disrespect. Your reaction, Linda Bruin?
Disgusting show of disrespect. These members were part of a special team set up to honor our fallen. That's their military job. So when they failed to show that respect, in fact, they disrespected them, they actually failed to do their military duty.
Is there any overreaction, though, Michelle Litchens?
No, I don't think so at all. In fact, the woman who did this also posted another picture on Facebook with a flag folded behind her, complaining that she had to go outside and it was cold, and why are we having funerals outside?
And it made some crack about how they were going to jack up the flag or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think looking beyond that, these pictures were posted on Instagram and on Facebook. And I think this says something about our younger generation coming up, saying that everything has to focus on them instead of actually what they're doing.
Michael Holt.
Well, you know, as a Vietnam vet, you know, actually my first assignment when I first got to Vietnam before I was transferred someplace else was to help load the planes of these coffins. So, I mean, this is disrespect to the penultimate degree, because what they should be focusing on is, this is a brother, this could be me. And that they can ignore this, I mean, they should all be court-martialed as far as I'm concerned.
Mike Nichols.
Indefensible. I know well a couple families that lost sons, and I haven't talked to them about it, but I can only imagine their heartbreak. It's indefensible.
I guess when I talking about this, I'm trying to think, what were they thinking in them? What were they thinking? Why would they think it would be appropriate? Wasn't there some moment where they said, look, you know, we have been chosen for this detail because of the solemnity, because of the respect for what it means to the family? Did any of them not realize how inappropriate this would be? Have we just lost that sense of honor and respect to the point that something like this would happen? I actually agree with you, Michael Holt, on this one. I not only don't think there's an overreaction, I think maybe there's been an underreaction up until now. I don't think one of those people that was pictured in there should ever be allowed to be in an honor guard, because I don't think that any family of a dead soldier should even have the slightest doubt in their mind that they are not being treated with the absolute respect. I mean, just imagine if you're bringing your son or daughter home, if there's even the flicker of doubt that are these people here who are supposedly acting like the honor guard, are they going to go back and yuck it up afterwards in front of this casket? None of them should ever be part of an honor guard again. So, is what they said this week the same as what you heard? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt.
State Representative Peter Barker said Republicans have no regard for local control. He was talking about a bill that would restrict local governments from raising the minimum wage. But he was also referring to state GOP efforts to rewrite school curriculums and residency requirements. What's next? Bedroom etiquette?
Michelle Litchens.
This week, President Obama apologized to academia for saying you can make more money as a plumber than as an art history major. He's right. So what I heard was the president capitulating to academia, most of whom would prefer students go into debt and receive degrees in women's studies and green living instead of seeking an education that leads them directly to a job.
Linda Bruin.
Well, when former Walker Deputy Chief of Staff Kelly Reinfleisch wrote in an email that sexual abuse of patients at the mental health complex wouldn't move people because no one cares about crazy people, what I heard was her contempt for persons with mental illness, her callous disregard for victims of sexual assault, and her low opinion of the public who paid her salary.
Mike Nichols.
By the end of the week, in response to stories about the release of 27,000 emails of one of his former aides, Governor Scott Walker had said absolutely nothing. What I heard was maybe a big sigh of relief, or more likely maybe just the quiet certainty that there are no big new questions raised here that haven't already been answered.
Well, last week, Mayor Tom Barrett said that we needed to take urgent action to fix the city's awful pothole problem. What I heard, I really screwed this up, so can I get the state to bail me out again? Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
Okay, one more time. The losers, Milwaukee and his children, because of the resignation of Greg Thornton. He was a true champion for children and was pointing us in the right direction. Along those same lines, far too many of our past superintendents were apologists who didn't have a clue or the fortitude to challenge the failing status quo. Hopefully Thornton's replacement won't be a member of that fraternity.
Michelle Litchens.
My winners are the employees of Volkswagen in Tennessee. After receiving a plethora of information from both sides, they voted down the UAW and will not unionize because they were smart enough to see that they like Tennessee and they don't want to become Detroit. My loser is the Federal Communication Commission, who wants to snoop around newsrooms asking reporters how editors choose their stories they cover under the guise of protecting minorities. What is this, Red China? Under President Obama, we are 46th in the world for freedom of press. Let's not make it worse.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my losers are the 78 U.S. congressmen whose 100 family members have been paid $2 billion for lobbying Congress since 2001. The worst offenders are Democrat Harry Reid, whose 3 sons and son-in-law are lobbyists, and Republican Roy Blunt, whose wife and several children are lobbyists. In 2007, Congress passed legislation to limit family lobbying, but they included huge loopholes. My winners are the Olympians, who made our country proud these past 2 weeks.
Mike Nichols.
My losers, unfortunately, the many employees of American TV and Appliance, which is going out of business after 60 years. But my winner, Renaissance Learning of Wisconsin Rapids, was just snapped up a $40 million investment from Google Capital. There are some lessons there about the new economy.
Well, my loser, County Executive Chris Abele, who can't or won't explain what he paid $10,000 to notorious hatchet man Graham Zielinski to do. That payment might link Abele to one of the worst smears in local political history. Winner? No, it wasn't his best week, but Scott Walker looks to survive this latest media frenzy. For 3 years, hostile prosecutors had access to all of those supposedly damning emails and never charged him with anything. Not because he and the prosecutors were BFFs. He wasn't charged because he didn't commit a crime. Nothing that happened last week changed that. Thanks for joining us, and join me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.